How often do bad days, bad weeks, and bad months happen in a relationship? We've been married for almost 10 years now, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Stability doesn't mean smoothness. If you looked at us from the outside, you'd probably think we have it figured out. Same routines, shared responsibilities, inside jokes that only make sense to us. We work, pay bills, plan trips, argue about groceries, fall asleep on the couch. Nothing dramatic, nothing flashy. But that doesn't mean everything is perfect. On average, we probably argue about something small once a week. Not yelling, not doors slamming, just friction. Dishes left in the sink. A tone that came out wrong. One of us feeling unheard about something minor that suddenly feels big. It's usually stupid stuff. We know it's stupid while it's happening. That doesn't stop it from happening. Every few months, though, there's something heavier. A stretch where tension builds quietly. Where we're a little sharper with each other. A little less patient. Where jokes don't land the same way and silence lasts longer than usual. Those are the bad weeks. Occasionally, if life really piles it on, stress at work, money worries, exhaustion, it turns into a bad month. And when that happens, it's almost never about something new. The conversations we have during those moments are familiar. Same complaints, same frustrations, same differences that were there when we were dating and never magically disappeared. She'll bring up how I shut down when I'm stressed. I'll bring up how she assumes the worst when she's overwhelmed. We've had those talks before. We'll probably have them again. At some point, usually late at night, one of us will sigh and say something like, "So this is still a thing, huh?" And the other will laugh, because yeah, it is. That's the part people don't talk about enough. Some issues don't get fixed. They get managed. They get acknowledged, revisited, worked around. You learn when to push and when to let something go. You learn which battles actually matter and which ones are just symptoms of being tired, hungry, or overstimulated. There's a moment in those conversations where we both realize we've reached the same conclusion again. That despite the annoyances, the patterns, the recurring arguments, neither of us is actually going anywhere. One time, half joking, half dead serious, I said something like, "Well, I've already invested way too much into this to quit now." She laughed and shot back with something equally sarcastic, and somehow that broke the tension. Because underneath the jokes and the frustration, there's a shared understanding. This isn't about winning an argument. It's about choosing the relationship even when it's not pleasant. And then, almost without noticing, things soften again. The next morning, coffee tastes normal. The house feels lighter. We fall back into rhythm. We go back to being affectionate, comfortable, annoyingly in sync. That's what happily married actually looks like for us. Not constant happiness, not endless romance, but a cycle of friction, honesty, recommitment, over and over again. Bad days happen. Bad weeks happen. Occasionally, bad months show up uninvited. What matters is that after the hard conversations, we don't pretend everything is new or perfect. We shrug, we accept, and we choose each other anyway. That's not failure. That's 10 years of real life, still moving forward together. When we were younger, our bad moments lasted longer. Not days, not weeks, but hours that felt endless at the time. We get stuck in them, go quiet, say things the wrong way, walk around each other with that heavy tension sitting in the room, both of us pretending we were fine when we clearly weren't. Back then, emotions escalated fast. Everything felt urgent. Every disagreement felt like it meant something more, like it was a sign, or a warning, or proof that something was wrong beneath the surface. Now it's almost funny how small those moments have become. These days, we might have a few seconds, not even a full minute, once or twice a year. That's it. It usually starts with something tiny. A tone, a look, a comment that lands wrong. For a split second, there's friction. The familiar feeling tries to show up, irritation, defensiveness, that old urge to react. And then one of us catches it. We stop. Sometimes we literally pause mid-sentence and laugh, because we both know exactly what's happening. Other times one of us just says, "Hey, this isn't worth it." And just like that, it's over. No storm, no silence, no rebuilding required. What changed wasn't that we stopped disagreeing. What changed is that we stopped feeding the disagreement. We learned each other's patterns so well that the warning signs show up immediately. We recognize when we're tired, stressed, or projecting something that has nothing to do with the other person. We don't need to prove our point anymore. We don't need to win a moment that will be irrelevant by tomorrow. When we were younger, we thought conflict was something you had to push through aggressively. Like if you just talked long enough, loudly enough, seriously enough, you'd finally fix it for good. Now we understand something much simpler. Most conflict isn't about the issue in front of you. It's about timing, energy, and perspective. So instead of digging in, we let go. We've learned that peace doesn't come from resolving everything perfectly. It comes from knowing what deserves your attention and what doesn't. Those long, heavy hours from the past, they taught us something. They showed us our limits. They showed us how much damage small things can do if you give them too much power. Now, when something flares up, it barely has time to exist. A few seconds, a raised eyebrow, a shared look, then it fades. And that's how I know we're not just older, we're better at this. Not because we care less, but because we care enough not to turn tiny moments into lasting scars. Bad days used to feel like storms. Now they're just passing clouds that don't even interrupt the view. We've been married 4.5 years, and from the outside our life probably looks like controlled chaos. And honestly, that wouldn't be far off. When I married her, she already had 5 kids. Shortly after the wedding, we had one together. And not long ago, we took in a newborn. 2 of the older kids have moved out now, which helped a bit. But for a long time our house felt like a small country with its own laws, noise levels, and constant emergencies. It was never simple. Not for a second. About 4 years ago, at her suggestion, I left a toxic, badly managed job and started my own business. It was the right move, but also terrifying. Money stress became my constant background noise. I'm the kind of person who worries about stability, about order, about things being in the right place. I've always had some OCD tendencies, and when you mix that with kids, sleepless nights, and a brand new business, it gets intense fast. On top of that, there was her ex. For a while, he was a recurring source of stress and conflict. Custody issues, boundaries being crossed, old wounds reopening. Thankfully, he's out of the picture now and likely headed to prison. But for a long time, he cast a shadow over our relationship. So yeah, there have been ups and downs. Plenty of them. In the first few years, bad days were common. Some weeks felt smooth, others felt like survival mode. There were stretches where things worked, sometimes a week, sometimes 2, occasionally even a full month where life felt manageable. And then something would happen. A kid acting out, a work crisis, a money scare, a blow-up that came from pure exhaustion rather than anger. When things went bad, they didn't explode all at once. They wore us down slowly. But here's the part that matters most. Even at our worst, we learn not to cross certain lines. We don't say things we can't take back. We don't weaponize each other's fears or insecurities. We don't try to win. There have been arguments. There have been raised voices. There have been nights where we went to opposite sides of the house just to breathe. But eventually, always, we sit down. And when we do, we don't just talk. We listen. That part took work. Real work. Listening when you're tired. Listening when you think you're right. Listening when you're afraid you'll hear something uncomfortable. Over time, that became our anchor. In the last 4 months, things have actually been good. Not perfect, but good. Most of the tension now comes from the kids, not from us. There might be 1 or 2 hard days in a month where everything feels heavy, where patience runs thin and stress creeps in. And when that happens, we sit down again. Sometimes it's late at night, after everyone's asleep. Sometimes it's quiet, tired conversations over coffee. We talk. We recalibrate. We remind each other that we're on the same side. As long as we can keep doing that, as long as we keep choosing to listen instead of react, I genuinely believe we'll be okay. This isn't a fairy tale relationship. It's not constant harmony or romance. It's loud, complicated, expensive, exhausting, and deeply human. But it's real. And if we keep showing up like this, listening, adjusting, staying respectful even when things get hard, I can honestly see us becoming that old couple one day. The kind that embarrasses the kids and spoils the grandkids. The kind that made it not because life was easy, but because they learned how to carry the weight together. Bad days still happen. Occasionally bad weeks, too. But the difference now is that we know how to come back to each other. And that makes all the difference. When I really stop and think about it, there has been exactly 1 day in the past year when I felt genuinely negative about our relationship. Just one. And even that day wasn't really about us. I was irritated, sharp, a little full of myself in the worst way. But when I traced it back honestly, it had nothing to do with my partner or with the foundation of what we have. It came from overall stress, work pressure, unmet personal expectations, that restless feeling of being dissatisfied with myself rather than with the life we've built together. Outside of that single day, I genuinely can't remember moments where my emotions toward our relationship turned dark or resentful. And that's not something I say lightly. We've been together for over 15 years. Not 15 easy years. Just 15 real ones. What makes our situation more complex, and often misunderstood, is that our relationship is open. And within that openness, I've experienced waves of discomfort, insecurity, and even trauma at times. Not because my partner wronged me, but because navigating openness forces you to confront parts of yourself you can easily avoid in more traditional setups. For several years, I struggled with the absence of other meaningful connections. That feeling of being unwanted elsewhere, of not finding what I hoped to find, hit my confidence harder than I expected. It created periods of self-doubt, loneliness, and frustration. Those feelings showed up again recently, too. But here's the important part. None of that turned into resentment toward us. I never looked at my partner and thought she was the problem. I never blamed the relationship for those feelings. If anything, the stability and trust between us made it possible for me to acknowledge that the discomfort was internal, something I had to work through on my own. That distinction matters. There's a difference between being unhappy in a relationship and being unhappy within yourself while in one. Our relationship has been a constant during all of that. A place of honesty, calm, and grounding. Even when I was struggling, even when I felt emotionally off balance, the core of what we share stayed intact. Bad days still exist, but they're rarely about the relationship itself. They're about stress, life transitions, or personal expectations that haven't lined up with reality yet. We don't spiral into bad weeks. We don't drift into bad months. When something feels off, we talk. Not urgently, not dramatically, just directly. There's no panic behind it, because neither of us is questioning the foundation. And after 15 years, that kind of emotional consistency feels almost surreal. It doesn't mean we're immune to difficult emotions. It means we know where those emotions belong. Some struggles are shared. Some are individual. Knowing the difference has kept us steady. If there's one thing this has taught me, it's that a strong relationship doesn't require constant happiness. It requires clarity about what belongs to us and what belongs to me. And as long as I can make that distinction, one bad day every now and then doesn't feel like a crack. It just feels like being human, in a relationship solid enough to hold it. It's actually harder to answer than it sounds. Bad months are the easiest to think about, because honestly, we've almost never had them. I can point to one genuinely difficult period in our relationship, a rough stretch where a lot of things collided at once, and maybe parts of the time we were long distance. Even then, I'm not sure that counts in the same way. Being physically apart was painful, but the relationship itself didn't feel broken. It was just hard not being together. Outside of that, no truly bad months. Bad weeks are trickier. I don't immediately remember one, which doesn't mean they never happened, just that they didn't leave a lasting mark. If they did exist, they were rare. Maybe once every 6 months at most, and far more concentrated during that one difficult phase we went through. Outside of that stretch, weeks usually resolved themselves before they could fully spiral. Bad days, though, those happen more often. Not constantly, and not in clusters the way weeks and months did during that rough period. Bad days tend to be isolated. One rough day here, another there. The kind of day where tension feels thicker, patience runs thinner, and small things land heavier than they should. What makes them hard to count is how uneven they are. There might be a couple of months where we have several bad days, maybe 5 or 6 scattered throughout, driven by stress, lack of sleep, outside pressure, or just being off emotionally. Then there will be long stretches where bad days barely show up at all. One, maybe none, across multiple months. It's inconsistent. And that inconsistency actually says a lot. Because those bad days aren't usually about the relationship itself. They're about timing. About life leaking into the space between two people. Work stress, health, family, mental overload. The relationship just happens to be where those feelings surface. What's important is that those days don't stack up anymore. They don't turn into bad weeks. They don't snowball into resentment. They don't become a narrative about us. They're moments, uncomfortable, sometimes frustrating, but contained. Looking back, the pattern is clear. When things are healthy, bad days stay bad days. When something deeper is wrong, they start grouping together, forming weeks and months that feel heavier and harder to escape. That's how I know we're in a good place now. Not because everything is perfect, but because difficulty doesn't linger. It comes, it passes, and it doesn't redefine the relationship. So if I had to summarize it honestly, no bad months anymore. Rare bad weeks. Occasional bad days. Uneven, unpredictable, human. And somehow, that feels like the healthiest answer of all. Because a relationship without bad days isn't realistic. But a relationship where bad days don't take over your sense of us, that's something worth holding on to. For us, the rough periods don't follow seasons, stress cycles, or anything predictable. They show up after good times. That took me a while to understand. We can go months feeling solid, laughing easily, planning things, feeling like a team. Life flows, conversations are natural, affection feels effortless. And then, almost out of nowhere, something subtle shifts. Not a fight, not a crisis, just a quiet misalignment. It usually starts small. Replies get a little shorter. We're still talking, but not really connecting. Jokes fall flat. We coexist well, but the spark dims. Nothing is wrong enough to point at, which somehow makes it worse. These aren't bad months. They don't last that long. But bad weeks? Yeah, once or twice a year, we hit one. What's strange is that nothing external is usually causing it. No money problems. No family drama. No work disasters. From the outside, everything looks fine. Inside, though, it feels like we've stopped syncing. I'll feel slightly disconnected and assume it's just me. She'll feel it too, but think she's overthinking. So we both try to push through it quietly, not wanting to create a problem where none exists. That's where the bad days start to stack. Individually, they're harmless. A tense evening. A conversation that feels forced. A night where we sit next to each other, both scrolling, both aware something is off. But after a few days, it becomes noticeable. Eventually, one of us breaks the silence and says something like, "This feels weird lately." And every single time, the relief is instant. Because the bad part isn't the distance, it's pretending it's not there. When we finally talk, we realize it's never about resentment or unresolved conflict. It's usually about emotional maintenance we forgot to do. Not checking in, not sharing how we're actually feeling, taking the connection for granted because it's been stable for so long. Once that's out in the open, the tension dissolves quickly. The bad week doesn't become a bad month. It never has. We talk. We realign. We remind each other that closeness doesn't sustain itself automatically. It needs attention, even when nothing is wrong. Bad days still exist outside those weeks. They pop up randomly. Stress, exhaustion, bad moods that have nothing to do with us. But those days pass easily. We know how to separate a rough day from a rough relationship. The key difference now is awareness. We've learned that our relationship doesn't break loudly. It drifts quietly if we're not paying attention. And catching that early, before silence hardens into distance, makes all the difference. So how often do bad periods happen? Bad months? Never. Bad weeks? Rare. Maybe once or twice a year. Bad days? Occasionally, like anyone else. But none of them scare me anymore. Because I know the pattern. I know the fix isn't drama or blame. It's honesty and attention. Some relationships fall apart because of chaos. Ours gets tested by comfort. And learning to notice that might be the reason it keeps working. For us, it's weirdly predictable. About twice a year, everything just drops. Mood, energy, patience, all of it. And almost without fail, it happens in winter. Every time. I used to think it was something deeper. Like maybe we were ignoring unresolved issues. Or maybe our relationship had cracks that only showed up when things slowed down. But over time, a pattern became impossible to ignore. When the days get shorter, when the sun disappears early, when routines turn monotonous and everything feels heavier than it should, that's when it hits. Both of us. It's not explosive. There are no dramatic fights or cruel words. It's more like a fog settles in. We're quieter, more irritable, less motivated to do the small things that normally keep everything light and connected. I'll get distant. She'll get sensitive. Or sometimes it's the other way around. And for a few weeks, everything feels harder than it actually is. What changed things for us wasn't fixing the winter. Because honestly, you can't fix it. It was learning to recognize it together. At some point, one of us will say something like, "Hey, this feels familiar." And the other will immediately know what that means. We've learned how to read each other in those moments. The silence isn't rejection. The short temper isn't resentment. The lack of enthusiasm isn't a lack of love. It's just winter. Once we stopped personalizing it, everything softened. We stopped asking, "What's wrong with us?" and started asking, "What do we need right now?" Sometimes that means more space. Sometimes more warmth. Sometimes just admitting out loud that things feel heavy for no clear reason. There's a strange comfort in knowing that these low points don't come from the relationship itself. They come from chemistry, sunlight, routines, exhaustion, things that affect humans whether they're single or not. And because we both understand that, we don't turn on each other. We check in more. We lower expectations. We remind ourselves that not every season is meant to feel productive or romantic or exciting. Some seasons are just meant to be endured, together. And sure enough, every time, it passes. Spring comes. Energy returns. We look back and almost laugh at how dramatic everything felt. Those twice-a-year rough patches don't scare me anymore. If anything, they reassure me. Because we don't pretend they don't exist. We don't blame each other for them. We face them side by side, knowing they're temporary. Bad weeks happen. Bad moods happen. Winter happens. What matters is that even when everything feels gray, we can still look at each other and say, "Okay, we're here. We'll get through this." And somehow, every year, we do.